Okay, today welcome to what are we called? VOTech Simplified Live, and I have to look at all my little dashboard things going on here. We're gonna be talking about cables. The number one support. I get this question. Well, what'll happen is I'll get a call. Something's not working, and we'll do all the diagnostics. And from a hardware point of view, cables are the first thing that fail. It is amazing to me how much they fail, and it is just wild. I cannot believe. Matter of fact, it seems like they shouldn't fail. When you look at a cable, I've got one connected to my mic. It's sitting there for a year or 5 in my case. And then all of a sudden, one day it fails. Well, and everyone's like, gee, the mic's not working. The first thing to check when that happens is to go ahead and check your cables. And so today, one of the things we're going to be talking about is USB cables, primarily because we all use those and they're different types of cables. We also have mic cables, and we can summarize it. You'll have a good background and a good grounding. Hey, Colette, thanks for joining. Glad you're there. And we're going to be talking about USB cables, mic cables, XLR cables, and a few others, but mostly the USB things because it's just a nightmare. There are so many different ones out there, and if you know the basics, you don't need to know more than about 10 minutes worth, then you'll be set for the rest of your voiceover career. So it's not like you need to become an expert in one. But note that we have different types of cables when it comes to USB. First, of course, we have power cables. In an ideal world, our power cables are away from our data cables. USB is not such a big deal, but if we have a mic cable, for example, and depending on the quality of it, we prefer not to have any power cable next to a mic cable. That can introduce some noise into the mic cable. So we don't want to do that. All right. So keep the power cables away from the mic cables. USB cables are not as sensitive to the power cables, so it's not a big deal. But we don't want them together unless they have to be. And if you're using good quality USB cables, they can deal with it. And then there's different types and lengths. There are some length issues, and I can summarize a lot of the stuff. You'd like a short USB cable if you're talking about going to your interface, and you would like long mic cables. The cables that go to your microphone from your interface, if those are 25 feet or less, no big deal. Just totally not a big deal. Buy higher quality. Don't buy the cheapest ones out there, but you don't need. So there's a couple companies selling some things that are expensive, and you don't need them. There are some. It's gotten to be so sophisticated. They're all made by machines these days, and there are different grades. Don't buy the cheapest ones, but you don't need to spend crazy amounts of money on mic cables. But longer mic cables, shorter USB. So USB is where we get into a bunch of things. Now, how can a mic cable fail when it's been sitting in the same spot and has not moved? That just, I don't know why. I just thought a mic cable should last forever. I thought that a USB cable, I have a couple on my desk, I'm going to grab one here. And so these little USB cables, in theory, should last forever, especially when I don't move them. They're plugged in someplace. Well, one of the things is inside here, there's little joints, there's little solder joints, and they don't contract. The machines that put these together today, they're putting such tiny little connection points, and over time, because they get warm and cold, warm and cooler, they expand and contract like almost everything else we have in life. And what people don't realize is, yes, over 10,000 hours, these things can start, and sometimes it's 100 hours, and sometimes it's 500 hours. And you can have the same thing with an interface, by the way. There's about 1,000 little tiny dots of solder inside there where things are connected together. And what'll happen is when they were made, they're making hundreds of thousands of these things, and every end has a connector. And what'll happen is that one of those little joints will expand and contract, 6,000 times over the course of a couple years. And it's a very minute amount. But what'll happen is every once in a while something will crack inside there, and all of a sudden it won't work. Even though it was not moved physically, it is expanding and contracting. And it just took me a long time to get my head around that, because I just thought, hey, I haven't even moved that mic cable. It would be different if I was plugging it in every day and unplugging it. I thought it was always related to the physical activity of plugging two plugs in together, but that's not the way it works. just the fact that it's expanding and contracting, rooms get warmer and cooler, but also if they're used heavily, there's electricity running through there. Is a tiny, tiny amount of electricity, but it is still running through all those wires. And at the points where they connect, those can go bad over time. If I have a refrigerator, it'll run for 5 years or 3 years or 15 years. A dryer, it'll run the same way. A dryer could last, I have one that's over 20 years old. I have a washer that lasted, I don't know, 7 years, 10 years, something like that before it needed to be retired. We've all had appliances that sometimes have worked for years. You can have a toaster that runs for 10 years, and then you can have another one that runs for 3 years before you end up having to replace it. So it's the same thing with all these wires. But let's talk about USB cables. And of course, if you have a question, be sure to throw it in the chat there, okay? But let's talk about USB. There's a whole bunch of them, and there's different ends. I'll show a couple of them. It's easier to show them on screen. I do have some of them physically here that I could show, but it's easier. These connectors are the USB-A to USB-C. Those are the two sizes. Let me see if it gives a better view of that C connector. It doesn't really. The big flat one is a USB-A. Those are in almost everything. By the way, there's a secondary component, hubs, which is a whole nother discussion, and is a secondary failure point for a lot of the tools we have. And one of the issues that we have to deal with is all USB cables are not created equal. Some are higher quality, just like pizza, just like almost anything else, high, medium, low in terms of quality. And don't buy cheap cables. But whenever you do buy them, buy multiples. Okay, whenever you buy cable, first you try these things out. I'm not in love, like I don't love or hate this brand at all. It was a good example. I like their pictures. So I grabbed that so you can see the USB-C and you can see the A connectors on this. Printers and older interfaces used USB-A. I have one on my desk here, and that is USB-A. Oh, here it is. Printers and older interfaces use this. Let me see if I can get that up in front of the camera. It's a USB-A, which is this part here. This big flat thing are USB-A. This is USB-B. And these are what we used to use. Interfaces used to all use these. Most have moved on to USB-C these days. And then what you have in addition to that is that now all the newer interfaces are going to USB-C. The Macs are all going to USB-C. The whole world is going to USB-C because the European Union has mandated that because people were throwing away chargers and getting new chargers, everything is going to this connector over time. Okay, so that's where we're going. We're going to all end up with these little flat ones that can go both ways, and that's where the world's going. Okay, so just know that. Now here's the thing: interfaces do not like long cables. Oh, by the way, there's a USB-B. That's the one. That's the old style connector that goes to almost all. Interfaces all did this in a while. Printers use this one. I don't know why. It wasn't my call on that, but that's what they were using. And then the Type-Cs, we just talked about that. But here's what happens. There is a max length for USB cables. But here's the weird thing. The interface manufacturers don't care. That there is a max for these cables just by themselves, but that doesn't mean that a specific device will work with that max. So by default, these cables come in different lengths, but if you have an interface, it comes with a connection that's so long, and a lot of times they're under 6 feet. That's probably the biggest standard. Your interface cables are under 6 feet, and then people are like, I need it closer because I need to adjust it. Well, one of the things that is happening, the world's going to where you have, like I have software on my desk, so I can control my whole interface from this software right here. I don't ever have to touch my interface, nor will you in the future. But today, many of us have to touch our interface by changing the knobs if we want to turn something up or down, adjust the headphones, things like that. That's all going away. There will be software where you can do it right from your desktop. So in my case, my interface can be a short USB to the computer, to the interface, and then you run a longer cable that runs to your mic. That can be 25 feet, no problem. They really can go a lot further than that if you needed to. And then you're going to have a couple other cables that bring over your headphones or your speakers, your monitors. So you'll need cables for that. Heck, we have a long cable and I love, even with a silent computer, I prefer that it is not in the booth. And the reason is booths get hot. And for those of you who, if you don't pay attention, heat's the enemy of all electronics. Excess, and if you have your computer in your booth and it's fanless, then note, you are 100% responsible for looking both ways and making sure there's no cars coming. You are responsible that interface stays cool and that computer stays cool. And even though it's fanless, don't think it doesn't create heat. It does. And yeah, if it gets extra hot a few days, that's not going to hurt it. But the reliability goes down the more it is exposed to heat. So I prefer, even with the fanless, to have it in another room and have it in a room that stays cooler. If your booth is ventilated and cooled, then that's one thing. Most people's booths or recording areas are not well ventilated, and in the summer they don't stay cool. If you can get your computer out into a space where there's lots of air circulating, that's just a better thing for all your electronics, okay? So if you can, be sure to do that. Now, when you're looking for these USB cables, there's just like so many grades of them. And I've gone to everything being what are considered USB 3, even though the interfaces and they're backward compatible with USB 2. They weren't always. They were always supposed to be. But there were points where it didn't work out that way. And so now what I do is I look for USB-C if I can, A to C, C to C, depends on what I have on both ends. But then there's a little thing. When you're looking for a cord, you have to look at a couple different specs. One, what's its maximum speed? And for example, this one, what is this one? This one supports the fast charging. And then in addition to that, you will look at another thing. Here's one of the little tricks that I have when I'm looking for these. If you're looking for them on Amazon, which is just like many of you, I go there and I try to figure out what I'm going to get. There's so many choices here. I scroll down, and I'm looking for something in here in their tables that will show me this piece of information right here. First date available. Why? Because there's a race going on among all these manufacturers to continually give something that upgrades their stuff. This is too old for me. This is approximately 2.5. We're getting close to almost 3 years old now. In a few more months, 5 months or so, it'll be 3 years old. So it's 2.5 years old right now. Look, I did that math in my head. And I constantly go find something and then say, no, or let me see if I go back here and I go back, then I'm going to look at ones. And so I'm not just looking at, let me give you an idea here. I'm going to look at this one here and I'm going to scroll down and see, all right, when was this one? When is this one put out and how new is it? And then they start talking about some of their different things and they all look great. It's really hard to tell looking at this. This company does a lot of cables and they really do a really good job. They do a lot of testing with their stuff, but here's something interesting. Let's go look at when this came out. This is 6 months younger than the ones that we currently have. Now, a lot of times they have really pretty pictures, all right? And they can fool somebody like Don who doesn't pay attention and I don't read, I just look at the pictures. So one of the things you do when I go through and I look, and now this one is a premium nylon branded, which is BS. But let's go look at it. And I'll go through and spend way too much time, but I only need it occasionally. And I go through and I want to figure out, all right, when is this one? When is this one? And I go through. And sometimes on some of them, one of the things that's really not fun is I have to find the place and I actually have to drill down. This one, I don't see it yet when it came out. And let's see if they have it on this page. Manufacturer, first date. Look at this. Found it. See, they hide it on there. But this makes me a lot happier. I'm 10 times more likely to buy this cable because it's within the last year. So that's a little secret for shopping, because I mean, I don't monitor these things. I work with them all the time because people have failures and they call me and we're troubleshooting and we're changing out cables. It's the first thing you should do is change your cables if something's not working. Change your mic cable. Change your USB cable. Those fail less, but they do fail. Mic cables will fail. And then you should have spares for everything. Now, you also just note, interfaces do not like long cables. I said that already. They like about 6 feet. And if you're going to get into something longer, first off, you shouldn't need longer than that. But if you do, then you have to experiment. There are these things called active. So let me back up. By default, the manufacturers have tested it because an interface needs near real-time communication with the computer. They are passing data back and forth so that we can hear it and it can be perfectly synced and as close in the fewest milliseconds possible that we can hear something in our headphones at the same time we're speaking into a mic. When you think of it, when you speak in a mic, the sound or the electricity created by your sound in the microphone has to run down that wire, run to the interface, and then run through another wire to get back to our headphones. And if those wires are longer, even at the speed of light, there's some lag that can be introduced if they're too long. And so what the manufacturers do is they ship one with it that's short, and they expect you to use that. And they don't directly support longer cables. But if you need a longer cable, there is something called these active connectors, active cables. And just make sure that, once again, what do I do? Because I can't, I don't know everything about this one and this company. I go look at the reviews. Yeah, that works. But I also scan down here and I look at this. See, this one looks really nice. This one here, and it looks nice. But as soon as I go down here and look at it, August 11th, 2015. Now, it is possible they've updated it, but I'll tell you what, the truth is, almost none of them update. They put up a new listing for a new cable rather than because people buy new. Okay, so I'm going to check out this one. We'll try this guy here. And sometimes they're more expensive. So I'm looking at what they're doing. This is much longer. I don't recommend. Keep it as short as you possibly can. This is a 32-foot, but let's just see. Oh, they probably have a 15-footer in here. All right, I have a 15, and now I'm going to go down, and I'm going to look at this one. Well, this one's 3 years younger than the previous. That's better. Still not enough. If I were looking for active, I'm going to go through and find one that is really only somewhere in the last year. Well, so let's try these people. I have no idea. So this is what I do, though. It weighs boatloads of time. It's crazy. But you only do this every so often. All right, I'm getting closer. Here's something, and I can tell just looking at the way they've labeled this, 3.01. Look for something that's within the last year or two, okay? And as I do this, you'll see it's the same thing. Since I know guaranteed that if they're making it newer, they are going to have gone through and tried to get something better than what they had before. And if they've had it around for 3 or 4 years, then I guarantee you it's not going to be the same. And where is this one? I don't see it. Oh, look at, here we go. Now we're closer. All right. And you keep going through and you keep on doing that stuff. And it's a royal pain. Okay. It is just a royal pain. And then it changes. So whatever I recommend now, 6 months from now, I'm going to look and do it again and try to find something to get the shortest possible active one that you can. And then there are extenders like this that are not active. Now, I'll show you something. I got something on my desk. If you use a remote, a wireless keyboard or mouse, which I do all the time, I also have this little guy. This is my Logitech dongle that plugs in. Now, these will go on a regular extension. This is a 10-foot extension. Why is this helpful? My computer's sitting outside my room. Sometimes, depending on the wall, I know in my wife's booth that I built, where the computer sits is outside of the booth, and the keyboard and the mouse, they work okay through the wall, but they have intermittent failures. I put a 10-foot extension on and ran it so it's just inside the room, and boom, this transmitter works great because there's no wall between the computer and where this little transmitter sits. And these things you don't need active. Even if you need 6 foot, get 6 foot. If you need 10 foot, get 10 foot. Get what you need to get inside your recording space if you have one of these. That really helps things a lot, okay? And of course, if I were looking at this, I would also, December 17th, 2020, that's not too bad. The extenders aren't that big a deal, but I would go through and find, I really literally, it's like, oh, okay, I know I want that, but I would still go find something where they have done something more recent, and I'd go through and scroll through all this crap and then find out that that's 2015, and I would instantly say, no, too old. I mean, we're talking 9 years ago it first became available, and I don't trust them. Well, if they didn't go through and just create a new one, a new listing, then I just don't trust them. I just don't. Too much experience through that. This is 2020. That's still too far away. Now, you know what? This spec hasn't changed that much, but I'd rather their design be something based on something in the last couple of years. Okay, so enough on that. Get something that's newer in terms of the cable. Shortest length possible for your USB cables. Long mic cables are just fine. I also might have a headphone extension. I may have an extension going to my monitors, my speakers, and that works great too. So let me see if there's any questions out there. I don't see any questions, so you're gonna have to throw a question there if you want anything else. By the way, the other thing to talk about that we're not going to go over today are hubs. And what happens with the hubs, oh, by the way, I have used the one from Monoprice before. Now, I haven't used this one, but I'm curious as to when they put this one out here. This one, look at this one. I like this company. I've used a bunch of their stuff. There is one they have that's not this one that I have used, and it works well. And what I've done is I've run an interface off of one of these active connectors, and what they have is they have little amplifiers inside them. But then there's the secondary thing. If you have to plug into a hub, it changes the dynamics quite a bit. And there are cheap hubs and there are great hubs, and it's a pain. You actually have to go through, and that's a whole nother thing. Sean Pratt was doing something, and we were looking at hubs, and I spent maybe an hour and a half going and researching hubs recently in the last 3 months, 4 months. And the weird thing is if I were going to do it today, I would actually redo it, because in 3 months' time, new hubs, new generations have come out, and I wouldn't trust what I had looked at even 3 months ago. But hubs are another failure point, and definitely a minor problem or a major problem. Oh, this is USB 2. No, it's a USB 3. So they have the blue on them. Sorry, USB 3, but backward compatible, and they have gotten really good at that now. So bottom line, Colette, how often do you replace your cables? Oh, yeah, you know what? I really don't replace them ever. Yeah, so I don't know, because a cable, you have this. If you're buying good quality cables, I mean, if the ones that the interface manufacturers, if you only need that, you may get 10 years out of it. They don't want the warranty, and they don't want the headache of somebody coming back and going, hey, my interface isn't working. If it turns out to be a wire, they have a tech support, they've done the support, they burn a bunch of time more than them putting in a good cable. So they don't want tech support calls on that. So your interface cables that come with it are really good, and they can just last almost forever if you're using the stock one. But now you can still get a bad one because they're buying from somebody else. They don't really make them themselves. They're buying them. But they tend to put good ones in there because they don't want the tech support headache. So I don't replace the USB cables until they start failing, but the minute I see something glitchy happening, then I will plug it and unplug it. And if that stops the problem, then I will go ahead and replace that cable. But I don't replace some mic cables because I have had them last for a decade or more. The mic cable I'm using now is probably 5 years old. I bought it from Monoprice, same company here. It's not this one here because it's a mic cable, but I don't replace them. So great question. I just don't even replace them before that, because the weird thing is, because they're such a commodity, the odds are if you put a new one on, it could fail in 3 months or 3 years or 15 years. And it probably doesn't have any more reliability than something. Assuming you're buying something that's within the last couple of years, the reliability is pretty darn good. And if you get one that's bad, it's just the luck of the draw. They have tens of thousands of little soldering points that are occurring there in the course of a month's worth of cables that they make. And out of those tens of thousands, there's if you got the cable that had the one that was just not perfect, and it expands and it cracks because of heat and utilization, then you're the luck of the draw. It's like getting a brand new tire, and then 3 months later you run over a nail and you go, oh, cripe, I have a brand new tire. That didn't mean you can't get a flat, okay? Um, and for Dale, yes, Dale, you will be super happy when you switch to your dongle. I said it down, here it is. So if you take a USB extension and you get this dongle thing in your recording space, you can use 10-foot. I know I've used 10-foot extensions, but from anything outside your booth area to your booth area, it does not need to be close. It just needs to be inside, so there's no wall. Once you get it with no walls between you, this thing is gold, and it's money. You will find that it works insanely well when there is no wall in between you and your keyboard or mouse. So hopefully, yep. And same problem. I mean, so, and Dale is saying, that he's seen this, had the same problem. In my wife's space, it was an intermittent failure. And the second I put in the thing that goes through the wall and the extension, regular extension, not an active one, and I put this there, her keyboard and mouse has worked reliably for years. And now I did it to Donnie's, I've done it in mine, I've done it in Lisa's. And then I have at least, I'll bet I have 300 clients that have that happening in their space, because when we had some glitch, I said, hey, switch this out, add this extension, makes things easier, makes things work really, really well. Okay. So hope that helps on that one. It's definitely one of those big deals. Short USB, long mic cables. If you do need an extension, be very careful about these. Active, you need something called an active extension if you need a longer USB cable. And don't pick this one. Do not pick this one. This one's too old. I hate when they're like anything more than 3 years. I'm just not buying it. I would query here and search for the active ones, and then I would go through. I don't know how old the active, and then the sponsored ones. Yeah, I don't know. And see, I can't keep up with these things. Nobody can. But I certainly would be looking at this one and saying, what's the shortest one they give? 16 feet. And then we scroll down and do this little song and dance here. And this is 2019. No. Okay. It's just a no. I stop right when I see that and say, no, too old. And now what I guarantee you is this one's probably old too. 2015, older. I just went backwards. So don't do that. Okay. All right. So, yeah. Okay. So Dale's had the same thing. He doesn't get absolute failure. And that's the thing. It's intermittent. And for me, that's more maddening. I'd rather it totally fail or totally work. I definitely do. I'm not a fan of this thing where it works one day, it doesn't work another day. That's just like people. We all, if Don is always an idiot, then kind of most people are like, yeah, he's an idiot. And they get used to it. Okay. What they don't like is that, he seems like a nice guy, and then they find out he's not a nice guy. You want people to be consistent. You certainly want your hardware to be consistent. It's the worst thing in the world to go ahead and have it work one day and not work another day. Get things that are relatively new, get things that are relatively short, and life will be better. All right. And if the mouse is sometimes glitchy, Dale, you need to come back, please. It's a request, and tell us after you get the extension on it. If that solved the issue and your mouse is not glitchy at all. And of course, you have to use it for X days, weeks to make sure. But let us know after you've done that what happens, and I predict I'll put a whopping $10 on it that it will work, and it will work reliably every time. And I think you'll be pretty wowed by that. All right. We will talk about hubs at some point. Hubs are a big deal. And then anything else that you guys want to talk about. But since I'm not seeing any questions for today, if you bring questions, then I will stick around and talk about them. If you don't bring questions, then I'll figure out, hey, we're just going to talk about whatever I want to talk about. And then next week, we'll talk about something else. There's a lot of good things happening in the hardware world, a lot of good things happening in the software world, man. This stuff keeps moving forward. I'm excited about it. And but I'm always looking. If you have a question, I'm watching the groups. I'm watching what's going on. If you have a question you want me to address, be sure to send me a message. Happy to do it there. I'm happy to take your message offline or your question offline and then do a session on it if it's really helpful to enough people. Okay? So you guys have a fantastic day. You know that when this is going from now on, we now have super chats, so people can go ahead and if you're getting a bunch of value out of it, then you can do that. You don't have to do that, but it is available. Okay, the channel's doing really well thanks to you guys telling so many people. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't. Be sure to go ahead and put on the notifications. It's every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. And of course, the Heller Baarns show is every Tuesday. And what are we at? We're at 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Be sure to check that out as well. And pickleball, yes, pickleball is going well. I mean, sort of. Pickleball is like any other sport where it's easy to get started, and it's like voiceover. Voiceover is easy. Audiobooks are easy to get started. The part that's tough is you get to a certain point where maybe you're doing pretty well, but then you get to the grind part, which is you still have to do a lot. You have to practice a lot. And being a performer, I kind of know the gig. It's you learn something, then you have to practice it so much that it becomes a part of you without you thinking twice about it. And there's a big difference between being good occasionally and being good all the time. And I'm kind of right in that middle zone where now it's work. So I am going to go over today. I've got a practice partner and we are going to practice. So pickleball is going well. But if I don't practice, I don't get better. If you don't practice in the voiceover world, you don't get better. And what I do recommend is if you end up with some extra time, you're practicing, you're auditioning more, you're doing more performing. You get your tech stuff out of the way, you get everything plugged in, working, and you spend the vast majority of your time, the 95% of your time, doing more auditions, doing more practicing, doing more refinement, but practice with a purpose. Don't just practice. It's practice with a purpose, making sure that you're refining. And if you don't have something straight, find someone around you, either a coach or a peer or an accountability partner that can help you stay on the trail of making sure things are better. And of course, you know, I have VO Jumpstart and templates that are all done, so you can check those out if that helps, both for Studio One and RX. But yes, Colette's auditioning constantly. Everybody should be. The more you do that, you get faster at auditions and you get better at performing. And the big deal is that you get better at performing and getting your auditions out the door quickly at a high quality with great acting, great tech. And then, of course, you know, I look forward to seeing you next week. Send me questions, send me comments. It's great being with you. We'll talk to you later. See you on the wires. Bye.